So John, tell me about your experience with motion control. Tell me, like, what did you think of it back then? What did you think of it a little bit ago? What did you think about it like a while ago? What did you think about it now? Like, give me your entire history with the medium.
Okay, so my first instance of motion control was Sega Superstars for PS2. I got a bundle with the iToy, and I was a bit of, I wouldn't say I was a fanboy of PlayStation, but I'd go on the forums and defend their legacy. So I guess you can call that a fanboy. And I would be like, the iToy...
You're just being a human being. Yeah.
The Wii is an iToy ripoff, I would often say. That was until I got excited for the Wii with Twilight Princess and ended up getting it myself. But I feel like when I first touched Wii Sports, my whole opinion of motion controls just changed. Like it was less of it being maybe a gimmick that can provide fun, and it more being like, oh, this is a serious way of playing games now. And that got even further on when I played Twilight Princess and started aiming with the bow. And then it was like, okay, this is the future. This is how I want to aim everything from now on. And while like waggle stuff maybe hasn't aged so well, just pointing has. And that's kind of evolved with us. And we have like a new age of pointing now. And it's just, I feel like that is becoming a standard, even outside of Nintendo consoles. Like Fortnite just got a gyro update on all platforms. That hopefully means something big for, all like Xbox and PlayStation as well. But gyro for a long time has been a Nintendo standard. I guess since not just the Wii, but like outside of the Wii, I guess Ocarina of Time 3D was the first like proper gyro game.
My experience with iToy was I always wanted the iToy. I was a GameCube kid, but when I saw the iToy, I flipped out. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Frankly, that is, I think some more people should kind of look at that as like what not to do with motion control. I can't really think of many instances where that was anything but just a straight up gimmick. But I do feel like the word gimmick got incredibly popular with the Wii. And I feel like the word gimmick has a very negative connotation with it when everything can be considered a gimmick. Anything that, you put new in your game, can be considered a gimmick. But the Wii was something special, I think. And while a lot of the Wii Remote's use was gimmicky, it genuinely, I don't think anybody would dispute this. It changed gaming, and it made it far more accessible for more people. And it showed that an Xbox 360 controller is not the only method of control that works, and it doesn't work for all games. And I think this is a mentality that I have, where like there are those people that are the hardcore gamers that they call themselves hardcore gamers, and they're like, we don't need that damn motion control, and they think that the only thing gaming should ever be is basically an Xbox 360 controller or an Xbox One controller, something like that. And that's a fantastic controller design. It's just incredibly versatile, and it works for numerous games. But to act like gaming can and only will ever be that, I think is incredibly close-minded. Where, something like the Kinect, as bad as it was, I think there was potential, and there's still potential with stuff like that, to have kind of a motion control camera where you use your body to control games. Not in the way that they do it, and I think that's the main problem with a lot of motion control from back in the day, and still some now, where the hardware is a good idea, and sometimes it's even great. I've been playing a lot of PlayStation Move games on PS3 lately, just to get that whole experience. Everybody needs a PS Move experience in them, and I think the hardware. Have you ever used a PlayStation Move on PS3?
I was using a PS Move yesterday.
Oh, see? So we have that in common, because I was as well. I think the hardware is fantastic. I think the pointing on that thing is incredible. It is so smooth. The controller feels great in your hand. There's some problems with it. Like, I don't like how the start and select buttons are on the side, and how there's no like D-pad or analog stick on the traditional Move controller. You have the navigation controller, but all my navigation controllers have bad batteries, so I always have to plug them into the system and hold it close and all that. But
yep.
The hardware is fantastic. all the games are horrible. there's
Like,
barely any PlayStation
There's some
Move
games with
that are good.
updates that are good. Like Portal 2 is fully playable with a Move controller, and that becomes like a Wii shooter.
I did not
with
know about that one.
Not only that though,
Yeah.
but there is exclusive Portal 2 DLC where it makes they've got these puzzles specifically designed for motion, and you can like stretch the boxes out and like actually make bridges with the boxes. It's crazy what they did with that. And Resident Evil 5 as well got pointing.
Oh, I'm not disputing that. Those are great. I'm talking the exclusive games, but to go off of that, isn't it crazy to see like these games for the PlayStation Move on the PS3 that have the Wii pointing thing? Like I was playing BioShock Infinite. I was playing BioShock Infinite recently with the PS Move, and not only does it feel really good, but it's just this weird feeling where you're seeing this whole thing and it controls exactly like a Wii shooter, but you're playing on PS3. It's almost like this this kind of bizarro realm version of like a Wii U version of these games, or a Wii version of these games, just of higher resolution. But for the PS Move exclusive titles, they are almost all exclusively terrible.
Yeah.
They are almost all like pretty bad. Where like something like the Sports Champions games, they're okay, but you can tell like they're not nearly as charming or replayable as a Wii Sports or Wii Sports Resort. But the hardware is always really good, and I see that with games, like you said, Portal 2, which I didn't even know that had PS Move support, but it's good that I know that now because I'm going to go out and get the PS3 version. But RE5, I just got RE5 for PS3, and then BioShock Infinite, and even a lot of Sony exclusive stuff like Killzone and Resistance 3. A lot of people from back in the day, and even including myself, really were critical of shooters like that using pointer functionality. And looking back, I'm just like, I don't know, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, this feels really good.
If you give anyone who doesn't play games usually a controller, they will flunder around. Like, they won't quite get how you move and turn at the same time. And I feel like the Wii is almost instantly understandable. Like, there's a small learning curve of moving the camera around while pointing, but games like Resident Evil 4, where the camera doesn't move when you point and the stick makes you move the camera, like that feels perfect. I don't want to play Resident Evil 4 any other way than pointing at the screen. Like that is just the perfect way to play that game. And there are still people today, like we were talking about them earlier, but 15 years after the Wii's release, there are still people who are like, I don't want to stand to play games. I don't think they understand what it is. Like when you play Splatoon 2, you aren't like taking the controller and going like, "Ugh." You're literally just doing these minute micro adjustments. Like that is it. You're not like radically swinging it everywhere, and that's never been the case. I think people think Wii Sports Bowling, Wii Sports Tennis when it comes to motion, but even shooters on the Wii is literally just like very slight movements. That is it.
And like motion control can definitely enhance a game, I think. When it's like even like kind of like the Wii Sports Bowling kind of thing, because games like, you know, with Nintendo Switch Sports, that wouldn't be fun any other way. Like you need the motion control for that game to work properly. If you use the regular controller, it's not as fun, and it's too easy. It's something that just like it doesn't feel it doesn't feel natural that way. In the same way that a lot of people that prefer the regular controller, they wouldn't want the games they play with that regular controller to just be all motion-based from there on. It's kind of the same situation where there are some games that just work with motion controls. Where, like, and we saw, like, a new genre of games just be birthed by that Wii era. Where it's just like something like a Just Dance kind of game, you know? That may not be everybody's thing, you know? I haven't played one in years, but it's also like that is like one of the most popular games of all time.
Oh, yeah.
That as in like that sells all the time. And that would not be possible with a standard controller. You need motion controls. And, you know, I think most hardcore gamers look at that and they see this colorful dancing game with pop songs and stuff, and they think it's just like, well, that's not for me. And I'm like, yeah, that's fair. But you can't look at that and be like, gaming should be this specific way. And I think with, you know, like you said, Ocarina of Time 3D and, you know, with a lot of the Wii U era, I think Nintendo did and even the PS Vita. The Vita did this as well with like Uncharted Golden Abyss did a lot of gyro stuff. And I think around that era, it was kind of discovered that you can combine kind of that Wii Remote style and a regular control style, and it makes for an amazing experience where you just have like this just amazing control. And it's not always perfect. I think like gyro control for regular games like let's say Doom on the Switch. I'm trying to think of other gyro-based games. 5, RE5.
Yeah.
Did RE5 got updated?
RE5
gyro,
did.
right?
RE4 didn't for some reason.
Yeah. I think because they were probably using they did that earlier, and they did RE5 and 6 at the same time. I don't know what happened with that, but I think like those are pretty good with gyro. There are some where it's just like it feels kind of floaty and it's not as good, and it kind of feels like they half-assed it, frankly. But I still like having the option. I think it's really, really beneficial. But I do still kind of miss just that IR pointer of the Wii remote, of just being able to know. And even with the PlayStation Move, like I said, the hardware is phenomenal. With like, you can tell exactly why it's so precise. Is because it has this giant glowing orb that it tracks. And it's just like, it feels very, very smooth. Stuff like that. It almost makes some like rail shooters or shooters too easy with the PS Move, just because it's so accurate. But I do kind of miss that feeling where gyro still hasn't fully replaced that. Gyro works best in smaller, more bite-sized increments because it always goes off-center. But I do think motion control is something that should be more embraced across the industry, where, you know, at least Sony and Nintendo both have it built into their controllers, even if most PlayStation games just don't include it. I think most people don't even know that the DualShock 4 or the DualSense, or even to that extent the 6-axis and DualShock 3 had motion controls. But the Xbox controller has been the same damn thing for the past decade. And I would love to see at least something like that, whether it be gyro or even just a dumb accelerometer or something. I don't know.
I mean, Sony are doing more. Like, both The Last of Us and Days Gone and Horizon Forbidden West will have gyro, which is that feels like a giant jump for them. And Fortnite just got patched on all platforms. But I feel like gyro works best when you can turn it on in specific instances. So in like Breath of the Wild, gyro is not always on. Gyro is not always the camera. But when you start aiming the bow, suddenly it kicks in. That's the point where it sort of synchronizes and syncs. That's it. That's when gyro is on. That works really well. But then there's other games where it's always on. And I think it works in Splatoon because your matches are like 3 minutes long and you can recenter really easily. Pikmin 3 though, I saw a lot of like claims that this is the definitive version of Pikmin 3, and for me, it just didn't feel as good as a Wii Remote. The Wii Remote controls were so perfect for Pikmin, both on the new Play Controls versions and Pikmin 3 on the Wii U. But yeah, this one, it just felt like I was drifting all the time and always having to have in the back of my mind to recalibrate, and it kind of took away from the enjoyment somewhat.
But the thing is, I'd rather have the gyro control than use standard sticks for that game. Because like I would rather have to deal with having the gyro pointer and having that desync quite a bit, rather than using dual sticks, which dual sticks is fine for Pikmin. It's a proven method of control for that game ever since, you know, the originals on GameCube. You know, it's been an option throughout all the games, but there's something about gyro that just works so perfectly for that game. And I just wish more and more games did allow for that. And like you said, it's happening. Like, more games are coming out with gyro controls or just options in general. But what do you think would be like what do you think the future of it should be? Like, what do you think the future of motion control should be? Because Nintendo is starting to dip more into kind of that Wii style of motion control, at least with like Switch Sports and other things, where it's just like, even like something like Super Mario Party, they had a lot of kind of waggly kind of games, and you have games like 1-2 Switch, which came out at launch. What do you think what do you think the future of it will be? Maybe even across the whole industry. And what do you want it to be? Like, if those are two separate things.
Yeah, totally. I guess we have two different kinds of games right now. We've got the Super Mario parties and the Switch Sports and I guess Clubhouse. Well, no, Clubhouse is all buttons, right? But I think there's two very different kind of games. There's the sort of party game, and then there's the traditional game that's aided by motion. and I think they coexist really well. I can see in the future, I think Xbox, maybe getting kicked by Fortnite, might get like a little Motion Plus accessory that you connect to the bottom of the controller. Just to, and then like re-release like an Elite controller with motion or something. Because Fortnite's the biggest game in the world, and that getting gyro feels like a big deal. And with Sony having this sort of first-party push with gyro as well, I think that's going to become pretty big on most PlayStation games. But it should always be an option though, and that's one thing I think people miss a lot. When I advocate for gyro controls, there's always one person going, "Oh, it's gonna ruin everything." It's always going to be an option. It's never something that's forced. Like Splatoon, it's an option. Breath of the Wild, it's an option. You don't need it. So I think that's always the best, like a backbone to aiming, rather than being the primary way to do it. And that's great for accessibility too. But I think games like Super Mario Party probably will just continue to exist. And even like on PlayStation side, like Astrobot has a lot of gyro, a lot of gimmicks with like putting the controller back, or even using the touchpad, and it seems like they're kind of embracing that side as well.
Well, there's also just the fact that VR is
totally.
one of the biggest proponents of like one of the main things you think about when you think of VR is something like let's imagine like RE4 VR, and you just see like the hands kind of moving around, and you see like moving around. That is a form of motion control. And I think, VR is still kind of a little, I don't want to say niche, but it's not like, oh, this is the next big thing kind of thing. I think people are just, it's something that people are interested in, but it's not like, well, this is what's next for gaming. But I think if anything's kind of at least getting motion control to be a bit more respected, it's something like that where it shows like, yeah, you do need motion control for something like this, because just using a controller and having this headset on your face, it's not immersive most of the time, because like, your hands are still holding a controller, and that's all it feels like. I don't know. I do think, like you said, the games like the Super Mario Parties of the world, and, the Nintendo Switch Sports, even though that's not really waggle, it's more so like the motion control is the optimal way to control that game. They're going to continue to exist. I think it's fine, because those games are, sometimes it's fun to have kind of that waggle kind of thing. It is another input. It is another form of input. And while it can be a bit spotty sometimes, I do feel like it does add to the fun, where you have a game like No More Heroes. I was playing like No More Heroes 3 recently, and the game starts off with them saying it's just like, we recommend motion controls. It's more fun. You can play with like regular controller, and it works perfectly fine with a regular controller. Like there's nothing wrong with it. But, it's just like moving the sticks up. No More Heroes was always like, it's a standard game, but for the finishers, you use the motion controls, which is a little more fun, because it kind of like, it is kind of like, oh, shit, kind of like go, it kind of makes you, it has you on your toes. And I think a game like that doesn't need motion control, but it does kind of add to the enjoyment. And I feel like, I don't know. I'd be okay with like the game industry going forward with kind of that mentality of like gyro aiming should be a standard, I think. Of course, it depends on how it's implemented, because sometimes it's just, but a lot of times with mostly like the Nintendo stuff, it feels great. I think a game like Splatoon really did. Would you say Splatoon is probably like the first major like? This is the first major gyro shooter?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Ocarina of Time was like 4 years before that, but that was like part of that was a smaller part of the control scheme. It's very specific to certain items. Splatoon, it's always on, and I think that's kind of what got people pushing for gyro to be a big focus. In Ocarina, I thought like, this is really good, but I didn't think like, this is how I want to aim for every game ever. With Splatoon, it's like, yeah, this is it. Yeah, totally. I think Splatoon was kind of what started all this.
Well, it's interesting because like that was such like a, I don't know, it just made sense for Splatoon, because like, I mean, you were using the Wii U gamepad, and just that feeling of like, when you're laying down the ink and stuff, just kind of like going back and forth. Like on a stick, I just feel like that just wouldn't be as fun or fluid, natural feeling. Yeah, because it's just kind of like going like, doing that to just kind of make sure you get the largest range of area as you're moving forward. It just works better. And I remember like when Splatoon released, there was a bit of pushback where people were like, I don't want that. Like, I don't want motion controls on all the time. And that's fair. You know, some people just don't want that. I think it's a great option to have. If you want to turn it off, I think that's good, because some people, you know, like, they either don't like that, or they might not be able to make that well movements. Maybe they're a little shaky sometimes. And you know, it's good to just have that option turned off if that doesn't work for you. But I think it's a good option to have. It does kind of bring a bit of mouse and keyboard-esque things and the Wii remote kind of into a standard controller. And part of me always wished the Nintendo Switch, because the top of the device is always out of the dock. It's always out of the dock. So I think it would have been a smart idea. They might have probably already tested this, because like this was a feature on the Wii U gamepad. Is the top part of the Wii U gamepad was an IR sensor, and you could use that as a sensor bar if you wanted to. And I always thought it would be a good idea to have the sensor bar be on the top of the Switch console itself, because it's already out of the dock. So it's something where it's just like, you already had to position the sensor bar weird. Like, you already had to make sure, like, I feel like that would have worked fine. But the problem is there's no like IR sensor on the Joy-Con unless you put it upside down. So you'd have to put both of them upside down, which you could do, because you put them both upside down and you control it like that, and the IR camera reads it that way. Would technically kind of work. But I think, I don't know, I feel like hopefully for the next set of controllers they design, I think it would be great to have IR back. I think gyro is kind of what they're going with for the time being, just because like it's kind of a jack of all trades, even if it's not as good. But yeah, I think at the very least, I'm very hopeful for the future that people accept the fact that like the Xbox 360 controller is not where we should end things, and we should always kind of go forward.
And if you're not sold, go to Nintendo Land, go on the plaza, and just twist the gamepad around. Like, that was my favorite thing at launch. Like, the camera follows your rotations around like seamlessly. It's perfect.
I've heard some people say like, man, I was getting sick playing that game, just like the hub world and whatnot. That's another example. There's a lot of great stuff. Even like the Zelda Battle Quest minigame in Nintendo Land. And Metroid Black, just like moving the gamepad around and experiencing that. Basically, the industry should take just more notes from Nintendo Land. That's all I'll say about that.